Hello there, my name is Dr. Salim Javed. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at Linga's Lalita Devi Institute of Management and Sciences, affiliated to Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University. We have been talking about different story formats under the title of Understanding Cinema, and today we are going to talk about a very interesting story format called Fichtean curve. The pronunciation is Fichtean. Now, so far we have talked about the three-act structure by Aristotle. We have been talking about Black Snyder's beat sheet. We have talked about Joseph Campbell, the hero with 1,000 faces, the 17 stages, and the way it is called monomyth also. Dan Harmon's story circle, Christopher Vogler's the 12 stages of hero's journey, Dan Wells' 7-point story structures, Michael Hawke's 6-stage plot structure, and in last few videos we talked about Gustav Freytag's pyramid. Now, what is the purpose of studying so many things, and why we are going to talk about a new story format called Fichtean curve? Now, the purpose of all these story structure is to make, this is basically to say that if you have a story to say, how effectively you can say that story, actually the life and the work depends on that. Greater your way of saying the story, more work you have, more recognition you have, and the possibility of carving out your name in the history of filmmaking is there. That's why it is important to understand these story formats, and there has been a general complaint that our lackluster content is making us fall behind in different industries, in different film industries in the world. So this is one of very important series where wannabe writers can learn how to make their stories more engaging. What are the points, what are the turns and twists that international writers have taken into consideration, and their stories are considered one of the best stories in the world. Now today we are going to talk about Fichtean curve. Now the spelling is Fichtean, but the pronunciation is Fichtean. So the main advantage of the Fichtean curve lies in its ability to provide a constant and engaging experience through a series of unyielding and relentless difficulties and challenges. Now the very interesting thing about this Fichtean curve is that, like, suppose if you remember when I was talking about Black Snyder beat sheet, or when I was talking about Aristotle's three-act structure, or when I was talking about Dan Harmon's story circle and a lot of other things, it was more about how your story will be moving ahead. Even this is also about how your story will be moving ahead, but one of the very advantageous element of this Fichtean curve is that how do you do it. Like, suppose if during the lecture I will be giving you an example from one of the films that was released in 2014, you will be knowing that this is how the graph will be moving from point A to point B to point C to point different points. But what goes in between from A to B, you may have the best story in the world, but what makes the story interesting is what actually are the events that are helping your story progress from point A to point B, and is there any direct relation between point A and point B, and if there is any graph which is slightly going up, is there rise in the graph or not, if there is a fall in the graph or not. So all these things, so I always say that every story in the world is a good story, but the way you weave it makes the difference. So one of the interesting qualities of Fichtean curve lies in the in the experience how relentless difficulties or challenges are presented one after another. Now the phrase Fichtean curve is often credited to John Gardner, who introduced it in his influential book The Art of Fiction. Now this is a very interesting book. When you read this book, then you realize how important it is to weave incidents which have got a sort of a crescendo in inherent in the events. This book was published in year 1983, and Gardner's concept suggests that storytelling should involve a series of episodic occurrences. Now this again is really interesting, because usually when we talk about screenplay writing, when we usually talk about film writing, the word episodic is something which people actually do not talk about. Whereas in the world where a lot of films and web series are released on OTT platform, this particular word episodic has become so important. And OTT is, if I may say, it's a very recent development. When people were making franchises, when they were having Spider-Man films one after another and things like that, so the episodic element was inherently there, but now it is more obvious. So Fichtean curve actually helps you understand how episodic development in the story is an important element when you are writing a story, and it progressively leads to significant climatic crisis also. So episode, look, when we talk about episode graph, which is very interesting, like if you are pitching to some OTT platform, they will ask you the season graph or the episodic graph. So, and there are a lot of writers, because they have been conventionally trained, so they are not aware, or even if they are aware, they do not know how to project the episodic graph or the season graph for that matter, and how the season, is there any possibility, like suppose if I come up with an idea which is one series, like suppose if I come up with an idea uh, you know about some futuristic society where robots are taking over, like for example Terminator. Now Terminator is technically prequel, sequel, and episodic in nature technically, and lot of spin-offs have been generated out of this film. So episodic occurrences that progressively lead to a significant climatic crisis, and the graph of one episode or the entire season climatic crisis should give birth to the opening, or the or how, as the way it is called, raison d'etre for the next season. Now the Fichtean curve, with its progressively difficult challenges landing to a climatic moment, is a powerful tool for writers. It can immerse readers or viewers into the heart of the action, enhancing the engagement and impact of the story. Now if you have ever seen any film of James Bond, which obviously starts with a very high point, the fight is on, and as if somebody has not seen a film and he goes to see it for the first time, he or she will wonder that maybe the film started long back and they are watching the film somewhere in the middle of some scene. But it is basically it looks like as if it is a climatic moment, and which is like it is very engaging, and great impact is revealed from the scene and things like that. But Fichtean curve is here to say that this can be at any moment in the story. Now the Fichtean curve is a formula that may be used to produce captivating and intense stories. It is not limited to any particular genre or medium. Now this is very interesting. Like when I talk about different story formats, like when I was talking about in the last few videos, when I was talking about how you can use these story formats in ad filmmaking, in short filmmaking, in feature filmmaking, or in making some cartoon shows, good cartoon shows. story structures, story formats, they are everywhere. If you have an understanding of these story formats, chances are that these makes you a better human being also, and your interpersonal communication with people, it helps you improve your interpersonal communication with other people also. So it is not it is not just limited to mass communication students, or it is not just limited to film studies students. Anybody who is interested in understanding the way communication works, the way stories work, the way images work, the way visual culture works, the way you and I behave, the way you and I expect things to behave, you and I expect things to unfold in a certain manner. When you understand these concepts, your understanding improves. You are no more a passive viewer sitting in front of a screen and not participating. You may enjoy, you may understand, but there is an element of participation which is happening when you are looking at something. I was like reading a few days back one very interesting book. What is the purpose of watching films or going to games or going to like suppose if you are watching a cricket match, what is the purpose? You are not playing there in the, you are not there in the field, you are not even the spectator in that arena. You are watching it through a medium, and you are enjoying when there are runs, when there are boundaries by our team. Why do you do that? The day we understand advertising starts unfolding in front of us, cinema starts unfolding in front of us, the way this world, the way the medium, the way the images work, you start understanding, and then it becomes very easy to understand the structure in which these images are working. So it is not limited to the students of mass communication or film studies. It is even for an engineering student also, because ultimately I was reading a very interesting article that why students of maths or engineering should study philosophy and humanities. Even if you make an app, like this is what I tell my son, that even if you make an app, what is the purpose of that app unless you are not in tune with the human requirement? Only those apps have become successful, only those companies have become successful, those who have actually solved some problem in the society. You take an example of any app. I used Google Map. It is solving some sort of a problem. So even the engineering requires philosophy and humanitarian or humanities. Now let's get back to Fichtean curve. The Fichtean curve is applicable to a wide range of narratives, but it is especially well suited for commercial fiction and genres including mystery, thriller, and fantasy. This piece elegantly demonstrates in a conveniently straightforward manner how a narrative progressively develop to achieve a gratifying resolution for a viewer or for a reader. Now, what is that? Now, what is Fichtean curve story structure? Fichtean curve story structure. So, to put it in a very simple word, it is a narrative structure that depicts the element of a story in a unique and fluctuating fashion. Now, the word fluctuating is important here because this is a word which has not come in any story structure so far. There is a circle, there is everything, but the word fluctuating, it is so interesting. Like if you can see on your screen right now, there are waves. One wave, the next wave is there, the next wave is there, the next wave is there, and there is a fluctuation. Technically there is a fluctuation, and then from a certain point there is a rising action. We will talk about rising action, we will talk about climax also, and then we will talk about final falling action also. Now this image is basic. If you understand this image, you understand one of the ways that stories are written. It is a very visual representation of a story, which is very, very interesting. Now, based on dramatic theory, it plays or it captivates audience by quickly subjecting characters to a series of intense difficulties. Now, again, it's the words are really big, but what it is trying to say is that the moment you know, obviously you tell your story through characters, even if your character is absolutely animated character also, like Wall-E, there is no male or female there, it's a robot, so whosoever is your character, maybe a leaf is your character, maybe a gust of wind is your character, maybe a feather is your character, maybe an animate object is your character, maybe something else is your character. Whichever form of a character you are using, that particular character needs to have a series of intense difficulty. I would say, I would not call it difficulties, but to make people understand, there it is called difficulty, but it's basically the succession of events that I am talking about. How interestingly you weave a succession of events is very interesting, and it's something that one must understand when he or she is thinking of becoming a writer. Like, a lot of experimentation is going on whether artificial intelligence can write, or whether artificial intelligence can write screenplay or stories or not. There have been some attempts going on, but not a very satisfactory result has been achieved till date. And you may generate images using AI, but story is still a far-fetched reality which is yet to be achieved even by AI. Now, the same graph in a very different format. Now, when you see this on your screen, it is called, there is a bottom line called A, then there are curves or the fluctuation on line B, then there is a straight line which is straight line C. So A is meeting with B and B is meeting with C and C is meeting with A. Now, this is a triangle basically with some sort of a fluctuation in it. This is what you and I have been drawing in our class 7th, 8th and 9th, and this is what mathematics students. Now, you must be wondering that how a concept of story writing is, why a concept in story writing is using a triangle. What is the purpose of having something like this? Why we left A, B, C and the relation of the relation and equation of all these three lines or triangles long back. We want to write stories, and why somebody is forcing us to understand it through a mathematical calculation. Now, this is something very interesting to observe, that there are three universal subjects in the world, whether you like it or not. First is mathematics. You are in India right now, you go to Japan, equation is same, music is there, it appeals people, irrespective of nation. And the third is cinema. You may laugh, you may cry, it will soothe you, it will make you angry, emotions are same. So there are three universal languages in the world, and interestingly I have interest in all the three languages. So that's why there are a lot of time when I talk about mathematics and cinema, and how mathematical equations, maybe in future we will really understand that if you say that there are films which are super hit, there must be some mathematical calculation when it comes to why those films are not, why those films are working and why other films are not working. So if you look at this curve, which is again A, B and C. So this is now the I have talked enough about mathematics and cinema. Now, although traditionally linked to novel, its versatile characteristics allow it to be present in another narrative form, such as short stories, screenplays, and even interactive media. I'll be talking about how video games are related to this structure, like video game Quest, and how they are related. What now? You must be thinking that video game is it's one of the formats which is uh, you know animation, and we are the people from we are people from not we have not done animation. So does this and understanding of arts will help us enter in animation industry? Yes, the answer is yes, it definitely will. Now, one of the very interesting thing about NEP 2020 is that it is transcending the boundaries of disciplines. It is no more that if you are an engineering student, so you're supposed to do this. If you are a medical student, you're supposed to do this. If you are a mass communication student, you're supposed to do this. If you have an understanding and if you know how to bridge to concept, welcome to this world, because you will be highly in demand. So if you are a student of cinema, you have a mathematical understanding, you can prove something, you can present some graphs, you can present some charts, you can establish some equation. Trust me, you are a person who is going to be in demand in the long run, because something like this has not been done on a wide scale till date in India. So when you can overlap boundaries, that is what I always say, that I listen to most of the lectures which is released on CEC channel, and though that is not my area, but I still get to learn a lot of things, because if you are limited to your own subject, chances are that you will have a very myopic understanding of your topic. So it is important to study across. That is the purpose of study also. Now, this A, B and C, what does it say? The figure above, the figure that you have seen is representing that line A represents the status quo of the story. Now, what does the status quo means? Now, if you remember when I was talking about the story world, when I was talking about monomyth, when I was talking about the Dan Harmon's story structure, when I was talking about the setup part, your story, look, there are possibilities. Like today I am sitting here, so there is a world which is existing on this side of my frame, and there is a world which is existing on this side of my frame. Now these both side of my frame can be, like, I can take my story 2000 years back, or I can take my story 2000 years forward also. So if I take my story 2000 years back, it's a historical film technically. Whether it is historically accurate or not, that is a different subject matter. Or if I take my story maybe 2000 years ahead of this point, then it's a futuristic film or science fiction film. How convincing or not, that is a different story. I told you, if you remember, I said if the setup created by Kalki, if the setup created by this film is not convincing, the film will not work. And if it is convincing, the film will work. If you remember, I said it almost 7-8 months back, and now you know the result, whether it is working or not, whether you have found the world created in that convincing or not, is absolutely you to judge. So the status quo that I am talking about, the line A, which is representing status quo, is that element of believability. Like if I am saying it's a bananas of future, so does it look like bananas of future? If you find it convincing, the story will work for you, and if you do not find the story, that setup convincing, the story will not work for you. Now the challenge for writers, the challenge for creative people, the challenge for anybody who is in the business of creation is to make that point convincing. It takes a lot of effort. Like people say, okay, we are making a futuristic film, so let me see what is available in Bombay. There is a special because one of my student is working in one of the science fiction projects right now in Bombay, so he has sent me few pictures where the robot has got a light here on his face, and the entire face is blank, only one light is there. Now when you see that visual, that is what I told my student also, when you see that visual or when you see that suit, okay, we are saying that he is a robot or he is a character from future, because he's working in a project, so he cannot say whether he is convinced or not, because he is assistant director right now. So but I asked him when he was talking to me, he was very happy to share, sir, I am working on a futuristic project, this is what it looks like. I said thank you, keep it to yourself, because these images are not to be circulated. So I told him that if you find that character interesting, new, your instant reaction, will decide whether how audience will be reacting to that particular thing. So when we talk about the line A represent the status quo, line B represents the rising action and the pressure points that we have been talking about and the crisis that is being coming, and the point where line B and C meet represents the climax, and then there is a decline. We'll talk about it we'll continue talking about it. Thank you very much.